No, the video is recorded. Thanks, sweet of you. As soon as this. Don't even say that. Okay, go ahead. I can't tell if it's muted. Yes. All right. As long as it's muted, then I'm in good shape. All right. So hopefully anybody else who's interested in hearing it live will join me shortly, either here or on the Zoom. I do not mind if you leave.
You take my picture off.
You're not on the picture because it's aimed at me. It's not aimed at you. I could turn it around and make it look at you, but I won't while you're putting food in your mouth. That would be really rude and awkward. All right. So I'm skipping the next little chunk and I'm starting at the beginning of, it's actually a fairly big piece. I have no idea if we'll manage to actually finish it before Rosh Hashanah, but I just loved it. And it felt to me that it was mamash connected. So we're just going to dive in. In the Nusach in the Sidur, we start with Zachreinu L'chaim Melech Hafetz B'Chayim, right? And we add that in from Rosh Hashanah until Yom Kippurim, right? In Shmona Esrei. So with respect to that Nusach that we add in, Yeshivat Levi says to us, it's necessary to understand what is this business of Zechira. And furthermore, what's the business of Ktiva, right? Because up until Me'ila, we keep saying Katveinu L'chaim, right? You should write us. Not only remember us, mention us, but to write us.
Not allowed to write.
Right. Only Hakadosh Baruch Hu is allowed to write on Yontif. Oh, I saw Vortlach. I think it was the Koritzer. Don't remember for sure. I think it was the Koritzer. Anyway, what he said was, we know that you're only allowed to do things on Shabbos. You're only allowed to be Mechal Shabbat if you're going to be for Pikuach Nefesh. Okay? So clearly, if you can't write on Shabbos or on Yontif unless it's for Pikuach Nefesh. So you can only be written for life. Not lehefach chas v'shalom, because lehefach, you're not allowed to do that on Shabbos or Yontif. So you can only be written for life. Isn't that great? I was like, only, HaKadosh Baruch Hu has to write us, like, if you're going to write on Yontif already, like, you can only be writing this in the book of life. I was just like, yes, that was a good part. Okay. Having shared that part. Now, so that's what our question is, but really and truly, like HaKadosh Baruch Hu needs to remember something. I need to remember things because sometimes it's in the forefront of my attention and sometimes it's not, and I need to bring it to the forefront of my attention, or sometimes it's in, or sometimes like I've mamish forgotten it altogether, like it's not anywhere in my consciousness at all, and somebody, but like by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that doesn't make any sense, right? And what does he need to write it down for? Or like I may need to write things down, right? Your friends just wrote down their contact information for you. Why? So that you could remember it, so you could get it into your phone, so you would have it to have the phone help you do the recall, right? But HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he needs something to be written down. Like, so what's this? So that's what he's asking. Okay, so he's saying, like what exactly is this? What is the issue of Zechira and Ketiva? He's going to answer more on the question of Ketiva in this chunk. There are other chunks another year. I can't believe we're so close to Rosh Hashanah. Wow. Baruch Hashem. Anyway, ki yadua, it's known that from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, there's nothing bad comes out from Hashem. Okay, it's in Eov, it's in all sorts of things. From HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's only Tov. It only comes out Tov. So how can there? And then, of course, that brings up the existential, the theological question of how can there be evil in the world if everything comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and from HaKadosh Baruch Hu only comes good, then how is it that there are things that we perceive as Ra in the world? Okay, this is a serious question. And so the answer is, and he's going to go back, so I may see if I can be makam there a little bit. I'll shorten things up place to place if I can, because he's going to kind of repeat himself. But he says the way it's received in the world, that's how we decide, it appears to us to be good because we receive it as good, or, it appears to us to be bad or difficult because we receive it as bad or difficult, okay? I'm very much working on, it's not bad that I lost my phone. I was maybe, whatever, I was maybe less organized than I should have been. I was whatever, it'll do me good to live for a few days without a phone and have, there are all sorts of good that can come out of it. It's not a bad thing. It's up to me to find the good in it. That's one aspect, is that it's the way that it's received. Okay. And so each one receives what's happening in the world according to their own ability and what they can reach for. Somebody with a short reach, the shefa can be raining down, but if it's too far away, they aren't getting any of it, right? If my hands are here, somebody who refuses to put their hand out to receive, all of those mashalim about HaKadosh Baruch Hu is giving, but you have to open your hand to accept. Here, I want to give you something, but if I want to give you something, you have to have a hand open to receive it. And if you don't have a hand open to receive it, then all the good that I want to give you is still stuck in my hand because I'm going to let go and let it bounce on the floor? I mean, sometimes that is what happens, is that it goes to somebody else. It doesn't go to you because you weren't in a fit state to receive it. Okay. So
you heard that there are floods terrible floods in New York. How do we look for the good in people being flooded out of their houses? Jewish from people, my daughter, for example.
I don't know. I mean, one possibility is that they will read it as a message saying, this is not meant to be your permanent home.
That's between us, but I wouldn't say that to her.
No, I wouldn't. No, absolutely. Absolutely. There are things that if I'm trying to read it for myself, what's being said, and okay, this actually is live and public, and, other people are hearing me say it, but that's true. But to somebody who's actually suffering through that, you never say to anybody, it's a judgment on you, or it's a this, that, or the other. What? Like, I'm privy to Kadosh Baruch Hu's cheshbonot. I am not privy to Kadosh Baruch Hu's accountings and this, that, and the other. I have no clue. But depending on the person can say, look at this. And now I am without a home. I have my insurance payment. Why don't I take that insurance payment and fund my aliyah? Because I'm going to be living temporarily and at, 6s and 7s and who knows what anyway. So somebody may take this as a, how was I ever going to sell my house? How was I ever going to get out from under da-da-da-da-da-da? And for them, this may be mamish, like a flood of freedom in a way. It could be for some people. For some people who aren't yet ready to leave for whatever reason, they, it may be more difficult for them. But, and it depends if they have good enough insurance, if the state and the government, the federal government provide good enough emergency relief, etc. They may end up that they have a house that had all sorts of bayot, all sorts of, who knows what. It was getting old and it was getting decrepit and this, and it had this, that, and the other kind of problem. And now it's down to the ground and it has to get rebuilt. And there will be a time of being at 6s and 7s while it's getting rebuilt. But when it gets rebuilt, it's often rebuilt stronger and better and everything else. And it could end up in Ritz Hashem. It'll end up being, the people that it's most difficult for are people who are underinsured or uninsured. And while there will be, I'm sure, both federal and state relief till they get themselves hooked into that and whatever, things are going to be hard for them. But, and I'm sure there are all sorts of other, like all sorts of other explanations. I've had so many things happen in my life. Typically, I've been blessed that before one door closes, the next door is already open for me. It's not always been the case. Right now I'm going through a period where there are some doors that have been closing and I'm not quite sure what door is going to be opening. But the point of the matter is that I'm open to have new doors open for me. Okay. Because that's how I look at the world. Because through, the 60 plus years that I've been alive, I've had enough experiences that I not just hear it as good theology and good chassidus, but like I feel like I've lived it. And so it's like, I'm not worried. There will be the good when I will see it as mamish, sweet, revealed good. And until then, I'm waiting. It'll be fine. But other people who live with more anxiety, who live with, it's an opportunity to start developing some of this, to start looking to start to look for the chesed and to, and maybe the chesed will be that while people step up for them and people are davening for them and people are sending them clothes and things that they need and the people, and all of a sudden they realize that there's a whole world out there of people who really care for them that they didn't realize was there before. It's an opportunity for us to do chesed. It's all sorts of stuff. That's the best I can answer. I don't know. I don't know God's cheshbonos. I know what I can do. Yeah. No, I agree. All right. Okay, so he goes on and he says, look, what happens is that the person has to be in a position to accept the shefa, to accept the goodness. Otherwise, it can land elsewhere and they'll miss it. As potential, they can miss out on it. Right? And he goes on and he says, look, if at the time that the shefa is coming in order to lishrot alav, I love it, to dwell on him, right? Like the Shechina Shuha. That lishrot is to sort of like to dwell, to center, lishrot, right? To descend upon the person and to sort of surround him, camp out with him, as it were. Okay. If at the time that this shefa is coming, he's busy doing some kind of mitzvot, and he's busy with God's Torah, and his thoughts are thinking about how he can do good for somebody else, how she can do right, and you're thinking about tov, tzedek, v'chulei. Okay. Then the shefa that's coming will enclose itself and will activate itself in the good thoughts and in the good deeds and in the Torah that you're busy with. Okay. And so it says, the clothes that you put on have to fit you. Okay. So if who you are is somebody who's busy with Torah, why are we so careful, especially in the Yamim Noraim, but even in these last days of Elul, we're so careful about our brachot. We're so careful about things that, we should be careful about them all year long, but somehow, we become more careful now because as the chef is coming, right, what clothes do we want to put on? Who do we want clothes that fit? So we want the clothes should fit who we are. And even if it's just at that moment, that's who we are. So the clothes that we get are the clothes for us, for who we are now. Okay. And I think that that's part of what he's dealing with here. And so he says, so then the shefa that will come down and the person will be able to draw that shefa into anything that he wants. And we've heard this from him before, that by means of our tefillah, by means of what we ask for, we can be mechakek the bracha, the shefa, right? We're the ones who determine what channel the shefa actually flows in. Kadosh Baruch Hu, the example I gave before was like, there's water in the water main, there's water pressure up to the house. How far do I open the tap? Mm-hmm. Or the same thing with electricity, all different kinds of things. There's the power is there. How much do I open it to let it into my house? And of course, you don't want to have a burst pipe in your house that opens and it floods your house. Like that would not, right? It needs to be channeled. And the Kedshat Levi has been telling us in the name of the Arizal and others that a person can channel it to the things that they daven about. I mentioned Ariella Zeitlin's beautiful post last week about the, about stuff that she davened for, she got. And it's like, maybe I should have davened for more, but that was what was on her heart at the time last year. And Baruch Hashem, she says, like, folks, go out and daven. Like, but it's true. But like, what are you davening for? And that's important. That's what we talked about last time. But he says, so he's saying again that once the shefa is coming and you're in a good state, then you can draw that shefa into good things. And he's going to later on, he's going to say, not only for yourself, for anybody else, you can draw the shefa for good, for whoever you wish it to be for. Like we all have this bechina of a tzaddik in us that we have available to us.
What do we have?
A bechina, an aspect of the tzaddik, who can, that's very much a Breslov teaching, to be honest.
Because I say Tzelem Elokim.
No. It's not the same thing. We are all created B'Tzelem Elokim. So we all have this Chelek Elokam Imal, right? We all have this portion of God above that in each one of us. And we need to see that and to recognize that in the others so that we don't judge them negatively. Right. So we recognize that they're godly. But no, what he's going to talk, he actually doesn't say it right here. He's going to say it in a little while, assuming I get that far. But he's going to say that you have the capability by means of your tefillot. By the way, not the tefillot that you do on Rosh Hashanah itself. This is tefillot that you do after Rosh Hashanah, the tefillot you do before Rosh Hashanah. On Rosh Hashanah, we don't ask for anything specific for any individual. Okay. But when we ask for particular things, we can, once we've made ourselves into someone who the shefa comes to in a good way, so then our tefillot, our specific tefillot will channel the shefa into whether it's life, whether it's health, whether it's parnasa, whether it's children, whether it's your zugiut, right? Your marriage and your relationships and your friends or your Torah learning, whatever it is that you want to channel it into, it will get channeled that way according to what you daven for. And what he's going to say later on is that you can also channel it to others. Okay, so normally we think, a tzaddik can do that. Little old me, maybe not so much so. But in fact, he's going to say that really you have that power also. And that's what I was saying. I was going to sort of the Breslov idea, because he doesn't say it explicitly that you have, because he doesn't talk about tzaddik so much. The Kedshat Levi doesn't use that same language, but that's very much what Rabbi Nachman talks about when he says that every Jew has an aspect of being the tzaddik within him. the tzaddik is like entirely tzaddik, or almost entirely tzaddik, right? But each and every one of us has a point of connection to the tzaddik, and each and every one of us has a point within us that can function like the tzaddik does, and that is what the Yershat Levi is setting the stage for here. I'm going to say more explicitly later on. All right, so he says, and so here he just says that once the shefa comes down, then by means of my speech, by means of my tefillah, I can channel it to whatever I want, to any type of goodness that I want, because I've made myself a vessel for good by being involved in mitzvot and chasadim and Torah and tefillah, and right? Okay. Because he says the shefa, the abundant flow by itself, in its own essence, is, he uses the word chiyunit pashut. Okay, so pashut, I love the word pashut because it can have like 3 different very important meanings, okay? We often use it to mean simple, like just that, not complicated. Not complicated, okay? That's probably the most widely used of them. But pashut can also mean abstract, which lifshot is to like sort of abstract something. To, in other words, remove all the complicating details, and what you're left with is the abstraction, the essence of the thing, right? Strip away, right? Because lifshot is also like the idea to take off. To undress, exactly. Right. So it's this idea of taking away all of the complications. So this idea of abstract and simple are going together, because it's a question of removing complications. But the other thing that we hear also, is to sort of spread out. Something diffuses, okay, is also. And so this is now what he's talking about. So he says, so you have this chiyunit pashut, this vital life force, simple, without complications, without restriction at all, or in a sort of a diffuse, not in a particularly concentrated here, concentrated there kind of state that comes from the source of life, okay? And it is sent to the created beings of the world to do good for them. That's what, because there's no bad, right? We already said this once, we'll say it again. There's no bad that comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Nothing that comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu is bad. He's the source of life. He sends this vital life force, this without complications, without restrictions, without the, they talk about a shofar. Shofar is actually supposed to be kafuf a little bit. It's supposed to be a little bent. It's not supposed to be, you can't use the horn of an ibex, for instance, for a shofar for Rosh Hashanah, because it's perfectly straight. That's also a pashut, right? Right? You can't use that. It has to be something that's curved, at least somewhat. Right? The really fancy ones, you see really fancy ones that are very curved, but it has, this is part of the law of shofars, that it can't be perfectly pashut, because by the time it gets down to us, we need it to be restricted in some way or other. That eventually it comes down to be restricted, but it starts by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's perfectly pashut.
I don't understand. So the curve does something to make it more abstract, no? No.
The curve actually, I mean, eventually he is going to go to the issue of the shofar, and he's not going to talk about. Okay, so no. So I didn't look it up, but the halacha is that you can't use a straight horn of an animal, which you would call a shofar pashut. That's perfectly straight. You can't use that. for Rosh Hashanah, it has to be one which is kafuf, which is curled back on itself somewhat. Okay. And then for something else, maybe it's for the Yovel, it has to be Pashut. I don't remember the halachot, and I didn't look it up. I apologize. But the notion would be that Pashut, it just blasts straight at you. Like, in order to actually receive it, you have to channel it. Eventually, it has to be channeled. It's coming from a Kadosh Baruch Hu Pashut, but we are going to have to channel it in order to be able to apply the abundance in our own lives or in anybody else's life. Right? Okay. I got a little ahead of myself. All right. So he says, anyway, so he says that this vital force will dress itself and tit pashet, spread out, that kind of tit pashet, not undress itself, like it dresses itself and it also diffuses, spreads out in all sorts of ways, for chayim, for osher, for wealth, for honor, for chen, for tiferet, for harmony, for all the different kinds of things that we spoke about. And how does it do that? Right? So when you meet it and you sort of, it clings to you and it finds that, the person, and it sort of meets the person, and the person's thoughts are thinking about things on a divine level. Okay, so then this level of life force vitality that the person has accessible to him is only going to be for the good. Right? If chas v'shalom, you're busy thinking about taivas of this world, you can deflect the good away from yourself, and instead of it's falling in your hands are too short because you've made yourself smaller, and so then you can't get it, and it falls on chitzonim, which in Kabbalah speak is basically how the bad things of the world, that's where they get their chiyus from. That's where they get their life force from. Sometimes it's from like the backside of somebody who has, but it also, according to this, can be because we didn't catch what was coming to us. And so, but it doesn't, like a Kadosh Baruch Hu is still raining it down, right? So if you don't take advantage of it, then less good aspects of the world may be able to take advantage of that same energy that's coming down. That would be a problem. Chas v'shalom, he says, the hefach, right? This is what I was just talking about, this hefach thing, okay? And so then the shefa gets drawn into these things called chitzonim and into low levels, chas v'shalom. We don't want to talk about that. We want to talk about the good stuff that can happen, right? Okay. And so he now is talking about, so what happens? So now in the Yisera Tumei Tshuva, okay? So at that time, he says there's a chituch hashefa.
The kid can stop freaking out.
Okay. So, what does he mean by chituch hashefa? The first time I read those words, I was like we get disconnected, like chituch, think about, right? But no, he doesn't mean disconnected. What he's talking about is, here's this big cake. Let me cut you a piece of cake, right? Chituch. So that's what he's talking about. It's like during the Yomim Noraim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is determining what size piece of cake he's giving us, as it were. All right, he's cutting us this chunk of life, of vitality, of shefa that we get to that we get to sort of use whichever way we want. I was friend's house, and the kids had been to their kaitana savta. And their savta does all sorts of cool things with, she's somebody who does pastries and does cake decoration, all the rest of the stuff. And so, kids play with Play-Doh. Well, she had, like that sugar stuff that you can use to make all the different things. And so they had all this stuff. So it's like, here's this pink ball of shefa. What do you want to make out of it? Right. It was just like, it was such an image for me of essentially what we're, Kadosh Baruch Hu was saying to us in here, let me give you this much. What are you going to do with it? Oh, look what you did with it last year. That's so cool. Here, let me give you more. Right. It's like, it's the same sort of thing, and if he gives it to us and we kick it around and we misuse it and whatever, then chas v'shalom, he may decide that maybe we don't need so much next year if we thought we could waste what he gave us. Like chas v'shalom, we shouldn't open that. But that was sort of some of this notion of what is this Yom Hadin? What is he judging? What's being judged here, and how does it tie back? But the point is that he gives it to us, and it's sort of in its raw, undifferentiated, but at the same time, very diffuse, very abstract form. Okay. And that's what's being cut for us. We're being given that chunk. Okay. And that's what's being given to us during the Yomim Noraim. Okay. And he says, like Moshe Levi tells us, so a person has to be very careful, to keep his thoughts on. And he says to keep his thoughts away from physical matters. Now, does that mean that I have to keep my thoughts away from what am I going to feed my guests? No, because feeding my guests is part of my Gemulut Chasadim, or it's part of Haknasat Orchim, or it's part of, or does it mean that I have to keep my mind off of, how am I going to be able to provide monetary or other kind of support for somebody who's in a hard situation? No, it does not mean that, right? It doesn't mean that, because that would be, that's not purely Gashmi. So when he's saying keep your mind off of Gashmi matters, I think he's talking about keep your mind off of things where it's totally divorced from spirituality.
$100 rib steak.
Yeah. If your next $100 rib steak is just for the sake of your stomach and not for the sake of the energy and you can't make a yichudim with it. You can't make yichudim with it. You can't somehow connect that to your service to Kadosh Baruch Hu. Yes, then that would be a davar gashmi that you should not be spending your time thinking about. Okay, and so he says, right, that your machshava should be devuk b'makor kayim. Your thoughts should be mamash connected to the source of life, meaning Kadosh Baruch Hu, in order that this chiyunut will come down and rest upon you, and in order that you can draw it, that the person can draw it to the good things that he wants to, and that it shouldn't that the shefa itself shouldn't dress itself in these outward things and give power to the outward things. We want to give power to the good stuff, right? And now, on the other hand, all the days of the year, the shefa pshuta that was coming from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so all the days of the year, I end up, and I'm going to pull something from later on and speak about it right here, because he is going to come back to this idea, is that we have a machloket. I could look in the Sefer and find it, but I don't remember between whom and whom, where one of them says that a person is judged at Rosh Hashanah for the whole year, and the other person says the person is judged every day. Right? And what does that mean? Like, how can it be that it's both just at Rosh Hashanah and it's every day? Like which one is it? Oh, here's the place there he's talking about it. I found it a little later on. And the point is that at Rosh Hashanah, I'm being judged what size, what's being nechtach b'shvili, what size chunk of life and shefa and whatever is going to be at my service. And on the other hand, I'm judged every day, how am I shaping it? How am I forming it? How am I distributing it? What are the things that I'm putting it in service of? And he explains that, so he says on Rosh Hashanah, that's the time of opening the treasure houses of goodness. Kadosh Baruch Hu opens the Sharei Chayim in order to, again, this word lachtoch chayim, here's your chunk of life, right, for the year. And that shefa is then given from above on the day of Rosh Hashanah. But on the other hand, in all the days of the year, each day on itself, the shefa is distributed according to the quality, the place where the person is. He talks about mamash, the quality, right, of the person. And so a good person, somebody who's doing good before Hashem, they give him things, everything that he needs, or they give just as he needs it, or they give the person, things that he will, that he'll eventually recognize as good. It's always sweet when you recognize it as good right away. And to somebody who is bad, the hefach chas v'shalom, is that it, and to be honest, when somebody who is bad is given wealth or power or any of these things, and we think, oh, look, he's getting good. Actually, it's really bad for him, and it's bad for the world, obviously, for a bad person to have that kind of power or that kind of wealth that they can do their bad stuff with. But it's actually also bad for that neshama, because if a person feels like I've got everything I need, they have no incentive to do tshuva. And so a person who's evil, who has no incentive to turn away from their evil deeds, is just digging himself a deeper pit. Like, it's not good. It's bad for them. It's bad for the people around them, for sure, because they have power to do whatever. But it's also so that the shepherd that they're getting, it could have been for the good, and it gets turned mamish for the bad. Like, that's, we don't want to talk. We don't want to know from that. We don't want that to happen. We would like it to all be, on the level of chiba yetera, on the level of for good, and that's obvious good, that extra level of lovingness that we feel because we see how much. All right, but the point is that in each day, and then they ask the question, so why would it be, right? Why would it be that, like, why does Kadosh Baruch Hu, because he wants to hear our tefillot every day, right? As opposed to, think about it, you could, this business of lachtoch chayim, right? You could give somebody their allowance for the whole year. I don't want to see you again until next year, right? Right? Or you could say to them, you've got 100,000, a million, whatever. Like, you've got a huge allowance, but you have to come to me every day for what you need. Why? Because I want to see you. Because I want to have the connection with you. It's there, it's yours. It's not going to get taken away from you, chas v'shalom. It's not that I'm holding on to it and keeping power over it, so that if you don't do exactly what I want, when I want, how I want, if you're not a robot that you don't get to have. It's that I want to see you. I don't want to just give it to you and have you disappear for a year, I want to see you. So it's yours, but I want you to have to come and get it from me so that we maintain the connection. Right? That's how he explained that difference of being judged at Rosh Hashanah and being judged every day is to maintain the connection. But let me see, am I holding with time? I have some time. Okay, we were supposed to start at 12:15. We started late. All right, I'm going to give myself a little, it's 1:05 on my computer here, which is probably not quite right. All right, so the point is that, okay, so we had this stuff because I'm switching back and forth through it. So I just want to make sure I don't leave out anything that's like really important.
So in other words, that Levi Yitzchak always focuses on the nice things, and he chooses to not dig into the unpleasant stuff.
He acknowledges that there is some unpleasant stuff out there, right? I mean, he said it's not just me who's saying, that it could be the hefech, chas v'shalom, but then he doesn't detail how the hefech could be. He goes back to telling you how the good could be. Absolutely.
You mean that's a shita?
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's a beautiful shita.
Absolutely. So he goes on and he says, right, so a person has to keep himself far away, that he should only think about being devuk Hashem and the mitzvahs and Torah and everything else to make himself this fitting vessel, etc. And okay. So he goes in here, right? All right, fine. So there's there are a couple of very neat mashalim, which I'm going to do more or less from outside. So how can it be? He's still bothered by this issue of saying everything that comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu is good, but there's bad. There's people who get it and they switch the good shefa that's coming into evil. Like, how can that be? And so the mashal, it's actually a mashal in the sense that Shlomo Melech came up with, right? Is that, Ari and the Gemara actually uses it also as a different one the Gemara uses. Anyway, so one of the things is for instance, about the way they used to do laundry. How did they do laundry? Okay. How did people used to do laundry? I mean, we know that if you have something that was white and it's stained, that one of the ways to get it clean, put a little bit of lemon juice or something on it, put it out in the sun, and the sun will bleach it. Okay. So the power of the sun bleaches it. If I go out into the sun, what does the sun do to my skin? It darkens it. So is the sun something that whitens something, or is the sun something that darkens something? It acts in two different ways. All right. There was another one also about the sun. It was brought in the Gemara in Avodah Zarah that Rishon ben Lakish said, he says there's no Gehenna in Latid Lavo. But what's going to happen? Because Baruch Hu is going to take the sun out from its case and let it pour its power full blast onto the world. Okay? Oh my goodness. And what's going to happen? So it's going to cook the evil people like Makadiro time, not just darken them, but like Mamash and Kadera. It's going to like cook them. Okay? And at the same time, it's going to heal, and the tzaddikim mitrapimba. The tzaddikim will be healed by it. So my personal mashal, I don't know whether I knew this one earlier or not. The Marsha explains it as it is, but I will send the thing with the Marsha for people who want to read it, but I'm not going to say it. But my personal experience of that was years ago, I had to have radiation therapy. And when I had to have radiation therapy, that was sort of the meditation that I did while I was lying there very still while they were shooting these x-rays at various parts of my body, right? Was that I just thought of them as these are healing rays. I wanted to receive, and they were very careful, right? Because that they went through, and they make it go in from different aspects so that it gets concentrated on the part that you want to burn away, right? The Russia, okay, the cancer, burn that away. And then, but that there's little enough of it in any other place that it's just, right, it's healing for the rest of the body. It's just, it doesn't do damage to the rest of the body. And I just, I would sit there and I would, or lie there actually, and I would, sort of try to meditate on, this is like Hashem is sending, this is his technology, his world that he made, Baruch Hashem, and that it should bring a healing for it. It should kill out the bad stuff. And for the rest of me, it should just be like a healing, like sitting in the gentle warmth of the sun, and that I shouldn't experience, that the rest of my body should not experience anything negative from it. I don't know to what extent my meditation and tefillah helped along with, but it certainly, I'm sure it didn't help, and B, but that was a yichud that I made between this very gashmi thing that I was going through, but the thing is that those same X-rays, the same X-rays that can kill can heal. The same X-rays that can kill can be used to discover something that's wrong that we can then go fix, whether it's in your teeth or whether it's a broken bone or whether it's like, there are all sorts of things. Okay. And so it's the same power. It depends on how it's channeled, and it depends on how it's received as to whether you get it as a bracha or as a chas v'shalom, as a klala. And yeah, okay. So that's enough of these examples. The point is that from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, what's coming is the raw power, the vitality, right? The chiyonit peshut, the raw power is what's coming from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and it's how the receiver takes it and channels it that determines whether it gets expressed as good or bad in this world. But when it's coming from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's all good. It's all good. He's not giving it to us because he wants somebody to channel it for bad. He's just allowing us the free will that potentially that could happen. But it doesn't, from his perspective, that's not the desired outcome, but he's handing it over. All right. And so he says, so from this, you understand that the shefa in one kolelet, it includes altogether both bracha for this person and klala for that person. Right? Like all of the makot in Mitzrayim. Every makkah in Mitzrayim, okay, was a punishment for them and was a bracha for Am Yisrael. Okay. And even although we say oy l'rasha, oy l'shcheno, because if a person is a kamtzan, a miser or whatever, so then his house will end up with tzarat, and eventually they have to take everything out of it, and then they have to tear the walls down. And if you're living in a house so that the neighbor has a shared wall, his wall comes down too. Not so nice, right? Except that what they said would actually sometimes happen is that, so first of all, the miser has to put everything out on the street. He gets very embarrassed. He gets very embarrassed because all those things, you came to his house and you asked him, could you borrow this? Could you borrow that? And he says, I don't have. And all of a sudden everybody sees what he has. They can be very embarrassing. I had people who asked me one time, how can the Torah do that? Like they were really, really upset that the Torah would embarrass people like that. Like halbanat panim b'farhesia, like they were so upset. And I said to them, but you have to realize that the only way that the Kohen knows, okay, to declare the house to have tzarat is because the person inside the house invited him in. Because the person inside the house felt that there was something wrong. And that's the first step for all of us. To me, it was such a chazak thing that they made me stop and think about this. That's the first step in doing tshuva, is to have a sense that there's something not right that I want to fix. If I don't have charata, if I don't have a sense that there's something that could be better, maybe it's not wrong, but that I don't have a sense that there's, there could be something better, then I don't invite anybody to speak to me to try to help me think about how I could be a better person. Like, right? So that person with that tzarat in their house, because of their miserliness, but they had enough arousal to tshuva, to whatever, that they're the ones who brought the Kohen in to look at their house, because they could have just ignored it. The Kohen's not going on a tzarat patrol, sticking his nose into everybody's house. It's only if he gets invited in. So the person, and then that halbanat panim is part of his tshuva. It's part of the yisurim that person has to go through, that miser has to go through in order to break that bad habit. Miserliness is one of the harder habits to break. Right? It's definitely one of the harder habits to break. And so the Torah actually is being very kind to this person because it's offering him an opportunity. But in the meantime, what happens to Oila Rasha, Oila Shcheno? What the tzaddik who's living right next door to the Rasha, like, he's missing a wall to his house now. Like, what does that do? So they said that if the person was really a tzaddik, he was just Beit Ani, he's missing a wall, he has to put up a wall. If he was really a tzaddik, what would happen is that because that wall would come away, then it would expose, right? This wall came away and here's this other wall. It would expose hidey holes in this wall where the previous owners had hidden jewels and money and all sorts of things. And so in that, if the person's really full out a tzaddik, then the person gets hidden benefits that he didn't, right? You were asking at the beginning, you're so right, that how much things are connected. Where is the hidden good in these things? Like if the person's really a tzaddik, then the hidden good, the stuff that was hidden in his own house, in his own home, becomes revealed to him by means of the negativity of the neighbor that caused the destruction, but then the destruction turned out to be for his good. I mean, that's for his betterment, right? Mamash. Anyway, so those are some of the kinds of things. But so the thing is that what this shepherd that's coming down can be a bracha and can be a klala, and those are the things those examples that we talked about. I'm sort of doing this a little out of order because there were so many things in here that I really wanted. Okay. So, I mean, he basically talks about, so the one more thing that's important that I want to talk about, and I'm actually just going to close this. Well, I can't close this. I can close this and turn off the Zoom. Don't close it. Don't close it. Whoops. Wrong. I wanted to close it so I wouldn't look at it. I don't know, looking at my face is a whole lot better, but at least it blocks the words so that I can focus. So what else? The one last thing is, and with this, he actually does bring it back to the notion of shofar, is that on Rosh Hashanah, right, we said that you're given, here's this chunk of life, and then you have to bring it down into whatever. So he says, that's the point of, on Rosh Hashanah, of the Zachrino, of the Zichronot are one of the places where we blow shofar, right? Zichronot, Shofrot, and Malchiot, but at the Zichronot, we blow the shofar.
Right.
Okay, so that's part of our, it's as much as he does of a connection, is that's part of the purpose of the shofar. The shofar is a voice. Okay, the shofar is a pure voice, right? It's the kol pashut, even though it's coming through a rounded horn, but it's still, the shofar itself is a voice without words. There's no dibur, right? It's not broken up into letters and words, and we've already spoken about, to the extent that we understand it, and Kedushat Levi spoke about it, in the sense that by means of the otiot, by means of the 22 letters or the 26, however it is, with the extra set of the ones, the long ones like the Sofiot, by means of those letters, the shefa gets connected and gets broken down into the things, whether it's the Aramaic is chaye, bane, mizone. Okay. Whether it's for life, for long life, and health, I guess would fall under that, or for children, or either for nachas from your children, or to have children, to have grandchildren, whatever. And mizone is parnasa. Okay. So whatever it is that you want to draw this shefa to, that's by means of tefillah. When it first comes just as shefa, okay, that's the kol pashut that hasn't yet been broken up into words. And that once you break it up into speech, right, once you actually start davening for things and you break it up into speech, that's the aspect of ketiva, because now it's in letters. Letters can be written, but letters are how I chotech, again, chotech, right? If the voice, the sound just comes out for me, right? Because I don't shape it with my mouth. That's all I have. But if I shape it with my mouth, I get different sounds, and I make the different letters by means of that. And that's what our tefillah does. That was the whole business he talked about before, about the otiyot, or mechakek, the channels for the bracha and for the shefa. So that was, so the kol shofar that we have that's the pure voice that's arousing the distribution of, let me cut you this chunk of shefa. And then the actual tefillot that we do, and this is in here, where we actually cut this part off and channel it this way, and we channel it into the various things that we want to channel it in. And he talks about one of them being the sod of Alma Dit Kasya. That's the pure voice. That's the hidden world, Dit Kasya, that it's covered over kaseh. Okay. And the actual speech, the otiyot, which are the sod of the Alma Dit Galia, of the revealed world. What you see is not all that you have, but what how does it actually manifest itself in this world? Okay, it's like we're way out of time. I thank you very much for your patience. So here's the deal: a week from today is Tzom Gedalia.
Which is today, we're on
Thursday. A week from today will be Tzom Gedalia. I am willing to teach.
I'm not fasting. That's not going to affect me.
It's not going to affect you. I'm going to have to, hopefully I will be coherent. I'm going to have to make sure that I do a good job of hydrating myself the night before, to make sure. that'll be coherent, but I would be happy to teach something, either something maybe still from the Mamar for Rosh Hashanah, if it has to do with the Serjum Tshuva, or else maybe from what he has to say for Shabbat Tshuva or Yom Kippur. I mean, he's got so much. I'm not going to get through everything he has.
I think I'm short 5 shekels. Can I? It's 35, right?
Right.
Can I owe you 5 shekels?
Yes, you can owe Simchat Shlomo 5 shekels. Not a problem.
Thank you. And then we'll come next week, and then we'll talk about the continuation of how many. Is this a continuing series, or is this time?
Okay. So if this time is convenient for you and for Rivka, who didn't make it this time, but for other times, if this time is convenient, then I'll continue with this time.
I like that. But I would also like to try that 11 o'clock or with the otiyot at Judy's place as well. And I would then come here.
Right. That was my intent, was to try to make it. And you can encourage other people to come with you. Right. My intent was to not step on Shavachs.
Okay.
Not to step on their scheduling, but also not to the extent possible. I'm also not stepping on Shiviti's scheduling. I mean, I don't have an obligation.
Don't even explain it. I understand that.
Whatever. No, but I'm just saying, to the extent that I could, I tried to make it so that people who want could take advantage of everything. Excellent. That people would have access to everything they wanted to have access to. So my intent.
I love your shiurim, really beautiful.
Thank you.
Even though it's hard for me, I don't have to run, but it's a bit hard. It's a very good exercise to listen to what he says. But when I think of, Tzaddik Ralo and Rosh Tovlo, I don't know how that fits in to his worldview. So what I'm trying to do is let go of that other worldview.
Just hear what he has to say.
And, because there's no black and white in life or in halacha or anything. So this is it's like balm, like what you were saying. I'm going to lie here and let the good wash over me.
Right.
Which doesn't discount that. It's just a mental switch, and I think it's very, very, talk about positivity, it's very positive.
Right. Yeah.
And then the other thing I just wanted to say quickly, yesterday, Rabbi Fink was beyond. Did you hear it?
No, I did not.
Where do I, if it's been recorded, do you know how I can?
Okay. At this point, I'm about to stop this thing. Let me just answer you a little bit about the continuation. So if this is a good time then, so that you can do the 2 classes back to back, and please encourage anybody else to come on over here and do the next one. My intent for at least for part of haShana, I have to take a look at it. Last year, we did a lot of stuff for Hanukkah, and I started preparing for Hanukkah mamish right after the Chagim, and I didn't finish everything he had on Hanukkah. This year, I think I would like to do he has Torahs on every parsha. So I would like to, I think, do the Kedushat Levi on the parsha for a while. I may try to pick up like a short thing once we hit Kislev, switch over to Kislev and then switch back. And I have to take a look at this
question. Do you think this is, between us, do you think